Hello, everyone. Welcome to the BIRTHFIT podcast. This is episode number 209, and we will be having Emily Stanwyck join us in just a few minutes, talking politics and parenting. So I'm sure we'll piss some people off, but before we get started, before we let Emily in, let me see, where are my notes? All right. As a reminder, none of this is medical advice. This is for your information and education only. Use this, share this. We'd love for you to leave us a review on iTunes, a nice review, duh. We will be picking some reviews as they start rolling in and sending out free t-shirts. So if we like your review, you'll get a free t-shirt, and we'll share one iTunes review, one Spotify review, whatever we like, on the next one or two podcasts. So be sure to go to whatever platform you listen in on and leave us a review. Greatly appreciated. As a reminder, we will be honoring discounts for those of you that are listening to the podcast. We have a discount going on right now for the prenatal training program, BF Podcast PRE, BF Podcast Pre. That'll get you 20% off. And then we will have another discount for the whole postpartum package, BF Podcast Post. So use those discounts. These are one-of-a-kind programs, so get on it. All right, without further ado, let's bring in Emily. What's up, Emily?
Hi.
Hey, let me change your name. It says Embo, and I feel like that was college.
I know. I didn't know this was going to be for everybody to see. I thought it was just you.
Let me see. Oh, yep. I've really been liking this this platform.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Yesterday I used it. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? And did a podcast with Birth Uprising, Dr. Sarah.
Oh yeah, I love her.
She's awesome. And we've got into some of the birth things. So yeah, I did it at the office, which I didn't have the best internet connection for some reason, but that was the only hiccup I've had recently.
I think I should be fine in here. 2022, still can't get internet perfect.
But we can rig an election, right? No. Kidding. Okay. So the title of this podcast I put as Parenting and Politics.
Oh
yeah. So I've hit a few people up to see what kind of questions they may have for you. But really, I haven't done a podcast on like the shenanigans that have been happening the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And even before that, because, a lot of people that I talk to, and who was I talking to the other day? Oh, when we went out before the Jordan Peterson talk, we went to the Jordan Peterson talk in Austin. For those of you that don't know, my husband and I and our business partners, but we were talking and discussing and trying to discover when people started listening to Jordan Peterson. And, they started sharing that it was really the 2016 election between Trump and Hillary that people started waking up. And for me, and there's going to be a question I'm going to get to. There's going to be a question eventually. For me, and I'm probably similar to you in that I didn't ever really pay attention to politics because I thought about it for a hot second in my life. I actually worked at the George Bush Conference Center as a part-time job in
that's cool.
at Texas A&M, while also working at the athletic center.
Right.
But I thought, oh, should I go into Secret Service?
Ooh.
Like that is like the hot second that I thought about it. And I did not think about it further than that until I did some research, like surface level research for each election, like presidential election, nothing other than that, which is wild to think about. But
Same.
yeah, like Trump and Hillary running against each other. And for me, like my internal thoughts were, how the F did we get here?
I
Like,
know.
we have somebody that had a TV show, The Apprentice, and they're known for saying, "You're fired." And
Yeah.
then we have Hillary, who, if you're not living under a rock, anybody that's been associated with the Clintons has been known to kill themselves. So what do we
Which
got?
I did not know before the election. Michael would make comments about her, like, Hillary's a criminal. Hillary's a criminal. And
Yeah,
I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, why
yeah.
would you say that? I was oblivious.
So here's my question. Let's back it up. How did you go from, being raised in a liberal family, and you can
Mm-hmm.
share as much as you want or as little as you want, into, people that follow you now know that you um, are very outspoken about politics and do not identify as a Democrat.
Right.
Like, how did you leave that world and what was going on? And, what were some of the catalysts of it?
Yeah, such a good question. Okay, so long story short, I grew up with super academic parents, super academic family, grandparents, and aunt and uncle. Mostly like on my dad's side, not to like bash my mom's side of the family, but like the political conversations were on my dad's side of the family, and they
Yeah.
were very academic. My dad was born and raised in LA. My grandpa was born in New Jersey, but lived in LA for most of his life. Jewish. Not that that matters that much, except that
There's a history there.
there is a history there, and I feel like much of the Jewish community identifies as Democrat for the social reasons. And so I kind of just, and then I grew up in LA, right? And I grew up in a really wealthy town where I knew there were Republicans. Like, as I got older, I knew there were Republicans, I knew there were Democrats. Like, it didn't really matter in high school, like, and middle school, and even in college. I was talking to someone about this recently. I went to University of San Diego, and San Diego back in the day, like, and I would say when I left San Diego is kind of when the tides shifted, but San Diego was a very conservative city. All through my college years, tons of Republicans at USD. Like, no one cared, which I miss. I miss those days. But I remember growing up, my dad would say, I'm socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And I always liked that. I was like, that makes sense. And he was a low taxation guy. He's a lawyer, right? So very logical thinking, very thorough thinking. And then Obama ran for president.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I got sucked in to the identity politics, and I didn't even realize it. I was like, I want a Black man for president. Black man, yes, we need one. And it's so crazy that I was just falling in line with he's Black, so he should be president. Like, I do think we should have all races in politics, but
we should have a woman president. Yeah.
we should have like, I really don't care. And knowing what I know now, qualification matters the most. But what happened was, I was like, Hillary, we need a female. Like, I want a female president so bad. Like I said, Michael would call her a criminal, and I'd be like, what are you talking about? And I voted for Hillary, of course. And then when she lost, I will share their names because they're very outspoken too. But Selena and Brandon, they were Trump supporters, and I was like so angry because they would just say never Hillary. And then when Trump won, they were like so excited on their social media, and I was so angry. And
Which is amazing because we were all at the same gym.
Yes, we were all together, and I was like, they're gonna show their face at the gym, like, oh my God. And that's really where it started. And I've told them this before. I was awesome. You guys are the reason that I started asking questions. And Michael was starting to kind of wake me up, quote unquote. But
was he already we call red pilled?
Yes, not like not obviously not where we are now, but he would identify as a libertarian, and he
Yeah.
always would just like not identify as Democrat. And I didn't really understand libertarianism in a way that made it different from Democrats, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously now we know. And so he would be like saying things, and I wasn't paying attention to him. Basically, I don't
Yeah.
remember what he would say before the election. I did not pay
Yeah.
attention. And then when Trump won, I was like, how could they vote for him? Selena comes from a Mexican family. Like, how could they vote for him? And Mike would be like, well, that's a really good question. Like, there has to be a reason.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like,
why don't you ask
well, that's
her?
a good point. Like, I don't think they're that stupid. Like, I guess there has to be a good reason. And so we would talk more and more about it. And that's really where my inquiry started. And then I was like, okay, if Selena, who comes from Latino family, voted for Donald Trump, like,
and she's worked her ass off, like
worked her ass off.
Like,
yes,
hardworking woman,
very kind, very caring, very like normal person. Like, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna like not be friends with her. Like, I think I can work this out. And then I started following different people on Instagram. And this was probably where my like identity politics was still in my life. Is like, well, I'm gonna find Black people and Latino people who don't look like me who voted for Donald Trump. I was like, there has to be more.
I feel like that's a noble like quest to be curious in that like in that regard.
And I remember finding Candace Owens, and I was like, Michael, I found this woman named Candace Owens, and this was probably 2017, and he was like, oh, I'm so glad you found her by yourself, and that I didn't tell you about her. And I was like, she's so awesome, and like she makes so much sense. And he's like, yes, like logical arguments. And obviously, I'm sure people could argue against her making sense, sure. But I was like, well, she says things that just like are pretty basic, you know, if you think about it. So that's really where it started.
Awesome.
And I never thought I'd be where I'm at now, which is like talking about it. But I love it.
Right? Yeah. Like, oh my God. Okay, so it's funny you say that because, or your story starts in Los Angeles, or I shouldn't say funny, but ironic, because I feel like that's a little bit where I got lost in myself, in my values.
Totally.
You know, and it's really easy because Hollywood, the industry, everything's right there. And, you know, I actually chose to sit the 2016 election out because I was like, I can't vote between the lesser of two evils here.
Totally.
And I hadn't done my research on Trump. I just knew I did not want to vote for a Clinton, you know, like, ooh.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me. And then, you know, what else kind of woke me up again was the Me Too movement.
Ooh.
And,
I remember that.
Yeah, this is actually the first time I probably like publicly talked about this. But as somebody that, you know, I don't use the word victim, and you know, somebody that's been raped, assaulted, and could identify that way, but I choose not to. The Me Too movement is the biggest load of shit. And it's even like where is it at right now with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial? Like, what pisses me off about that is the fact that we've convicted one person on this sex trafficking deal, and it's a woman. So where are all the other males? You know, every single male. The one male, Jeffrey Epstein, killed himself supposedly. But yeah, so little things like that kept coming to the surface. And I will share this also. The other thing that kind of started waking me up was back in 2006, whenever I started going down the big pharma vaccine rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I got to meet the women of Vaxxed. And in fact, they were guest speakers on this podcast way back in the day.
I recently listened to that in the last year. It's so good. So timely. Old, but like not.
Yeah. It's unreal. And, you know, I think 2016 was where all of my worlds collided in the sense of big pharma, government, elitist, you know, big tech even. And I felt the effects of big tech in the last 2 years, you know, similar to Rob Wolf, where Google just changed all their algorithms, you know, just about the same time as the pandemic started. And then, you know, social media now and censoring and everything. So it's just wild.
It's been a crazy journey these last few years.
Yeah. So speaking of politics and parenting, what was your views and things? So when was your first born? And basically, what were your views leading up to that first birth? And then how do you think they shifted after?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so my first was born in June of 2018. I really think before it was like family values, you know, raising your child, like, and sometimes I'll say this to like super liberal people and they like look at me like I am insane, but I say like preserving innocence. And they're like, what? Why? Like, why? You know, talking about teaching sex ed to kids in like 3rd grade. I'm like, no, like just no. Preserving innocence, outdoor play, no technology. And, you know, it was really more just like, kind of just like pro-choice, you know, like my baby, my choice, my body, my choice. Like, and it still is that, but so I remember texting you and being like, I apologize for ever thinking you were a crazy anti-vaxxer. Do you remember that when I texted you? And you're like, thanks for saying that. And I'm like, wow, like I never thought I'd be here to where I will not put another pharmaceutical product into my body or my child's body unless they're fucking dying.
Yeah.
Like, unless they are dying.
Yeah, no
you know, medications aside, like we were talking about antibiotics, like antibiotics, last resort situation, like Stosh had an infection. We did do antibiotics. We like cringe at the thought of it, but that's where we were at, you know? And we know what to do to support the gut post antibiotics, you know?
Yeah.
So I knew that we were not going to give Stosh all the vaccines. Like there were a few that we did not give him. And our pediatrician was like, we started daycare for Stosh and it was just this woman's house. I can't remember if she was licensed or not. I think she may have, like, I don't even know. We didn't care. We loved her. I was like, I would rather you not be licensed, honestly. And our pediatrician was like, how did he start daycare? You guys still haven't given him Hep B. And we're like, they don't care. And she's like, oh. Oh, and then we started another one who was licensed. Yes, now I remember. First one didn't even ask, didn't care at all. Second one, after like once daycares reopened after COVID, she was like, they asked for immunizations and we left Hep B, chickenpox, and like flu shot blank. And
this was still in Los Angeles.
Still in LA. And the woman who owned it was like, okay, just let me know when he gets these shots. And we're like, okay, sure. And our pediatrician was like, how did you do that? And I was like, we just did. You know, we just told her he doesn't have this, and she didn't care. It was, again, a house thing. It wasn't like an established school, whatever. So obviously I know a lot of people who don't vaccinate their kids in LA, especially teaching the postpartum series, like people would confide in me and talk to me and ask my opinions. And I would be like, before I had kids, like I was like, I have no opinion on this. Like you choose, like, I don't know enough. And then when it came down to us, like deciding, I was like, well, and this is a long answer to your question, which I haven't forgotten, but it was like, there's got to be a reason. Again, there's got to be a reason why these people aren't vaccinating their kids. Like, they're not idiots. The people who I talk to who are choosing not to vaccinate their kids are some very intelligent people. Like, and again, it was kind of like, how could Selena vote for Donald Trump? She's not stupid. There's got to be a good reason. How could people not vaccinate their kids? They're not stupid. There's got to be a good reason. So I was very hesitant with Stosh, but we did our research, quote unquote, and it was definitely surface level. And Michael was like, I think the adjuvants and the preservatives are what you really want to avoid. So we want to find single dose vaccines, and we're not going to do these few ones.
Mm-hmm.
And our pediatrician was very supportive. Single dose vaccines, yada, yada, yada. Turns out single dose is kind of BS.
Yeah.
They still have shit in them. Like, sure, they don't have mercury or whatever you call it, whatever the scientific name for it is. But like, no vaccines have anymore. Few do. Like the ones they sent to Africa probably do, but not here. And then I was talking to a friend who doesn't vaccinate their kids, and she's like, did you know that in order to get a medical exemption in California, your kid has to have 8 adverse reactions to vaccinations? And I was like, what? Now, that may not be completely true, but I know it's not one.
Yeah.
I know it's not one. So I was like, well, that's insane. And then around that same time, I was getting outspoken about California because of the homelessness. So this is where post first baby, my politics started to change, because the homelessness got really bad in LA. I am working on a main street in LA, in Venice.
Lincoln Boulevard,
wearing a baby most days. Someone across the street's taking a shit in broad daylight, pants down. While I'm teaching class, there's a shooting in broad daylight across the street the next week, needles on the sidewalk. And it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. Like, we just got numb to it.
Yeah.
We just got used to it. The homelessness was really bad. And I started being really outspoken on the internet. And Michael would be like, so do you think like Republicans are responsible for this? And I was like, well, obviously not.
Who do you think's responsible?
He's like, this is a Democrat state. This is a Democrat city. Every single person who is on city council, the mayor, like, they're all Democrats. And I want to start talking to you about why they don't care about this stuff, and why they, you could call me a conspiracy theorist, like, encourage this, and it's like, you can get on your high horse about both Republicans and Democrats being evil in their own way. I am not saying Republicans are better than Democrats.
But he was simply trying to point out that
these
people got voted in office.
And here's all this bad stuff that's happening that we are disguising, as just people down on their luck, and we should just have compassion for them. It doesn't work for me. And I started to explain to people, do you know what compassion means? It means with suffering. So like empathetic, right? Okay. What we are doing in California is pitying them and not doing anything. Compassion without accountability is pitying. So I started being really outspoken, and people would get really pissed at me and be like, why do you talk so much about the homelessness? Like, why do you care so much? I'm like, do you think this is okay? Well, no, but these people, they're not all crackheads. These people are down on their luck. I'm like, go ask them then. Go help them.
Yeah.
Why don't you invite them into your house and let them use your shower?
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
No one does. I knew one person who did that.
It was because you were challenging their belief systems.
Yeah.
And people just get defensive in that.
And so I would always tell people, like, I'm a libertarian now, like, and even though I was definitely, like, for sure more aligned with libertarian, I would say I was starting to become a little more conservative. And I do like the libertarian, mindset. And I definitely am very conservative about a few things. But my dad would be like, so, okay, you're a libertarian, the whole thing is like, leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. So why can't someone just do drugs wherever they want? I'm like, that's not leaving us alone. That's destroying society. And I'm like, libertarians aren't outlaws. We aren't lawless people. Like, we like law and order, but I do want people to do whatever they want within reason. That is not within reason. You could say that's my opinion. Fine, whatever. So then it started to really shift before the second baby. And I started to learn more about vaccines, learn more about school requirements for vaccines and the CDC schedule and like all the things that like take power away from parents. And that's where I really was like, oh, I'm about to go hardcore.
To go ham.
Yeah. Because I was like, this just isn't right. Like, if I don't want to give my kid, the hepatitis B shot, they can't go to school. Like, how does that work?
And you're still paying taxes.
And I'm still paying taxes for schools.
Yeah.
So how does it, like, that makes no sense to me. And people are like, so you are an anti-vaxxer now and you want everyone to die? I'm like, wow, okay. I don't know how to have this conversation with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, they changed because I was like kind of in this blissful ignorance place, but starting to notice things that didn't sit well with me, to like really deep diving, I'll say, and being like, oh, we have major problems.
Yeah.
With parents and their autonomy, basically.
Yeah, totally.
And then COVID.
Yeah. So we're not even in COVID yet, but
I know.
It's when you start to dig deep into the institutions and marketing around parents and birth in our country. And then you start to get closer to the top of like the iceberg. Then you start to hit big pharma and government, and you're like, oh shit, like this, they're in bed with each other.
Yes.
And
yeah, birth is a whole, obviously I was in the birth world too. Like, that's a layer.
Yeah. And I feel like, when you go more than surface level deep in the birth world, things start to challenge you at your core. And because birth affects everybody. You were born, and more than likely, 80-something% of women will give birth at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And so that is the biggest, most transformational event of that woman's life and that new human's life.
Yeah.
So it's wild. Okay, so speaking of COVID, and I've been saying DVOC on the internet because everything is censored. And, I would let's go through a timeline of, when,
let's do it.
So y'all moved here after COVID started.
Yes.
And so when did y'all move here? And, COVID basically started March 2020. So what were you doing around that time, and when did y'all move?
Okay. March 2020, what was so crazy was I was pregnant. So I announced my pregnancy on March 14th. It was a Friday. I remember. Yeah. I'm not kidding.
That was the Friday.
No. It was the 13th. It was Friday the 13th. I remember because I had a wedding in Huntington Beach the following day. And it was on that Friday that we decided to close the gym for 2 weeks before the mayor made an announcement. He made an announcement that night. Starting on Monday, we're doing 15 days to slow the spread.
Yeah.
So I announced my pregnancy, and then I had been hearing about this bat flu for probably a month, because I follow alternative sources.
Yeah.
And I would see a picture of a dead bat in soup and in China, and I was like, that's disgusting. Gross. And then, talks of it coming here. I was nervous because I was like, well, I am 14 weeks pregnant. I don't want to get sick. I had a 24-hour flu with Stosh, and it was terrible when I was pregnant. It was terrible. I was like, I just don't want to get sick. And we had a wedding the next day, and Michael was like, I'm not going to go because I don't want Stosh to get sick. I'm going to stay in LA. They're saying don't do groups of more than 50. And I was like, I have to go to this wedding. It's one of my oldest friends. I really want to go, but I will leave before dinner and dancing.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really care about because I was pregnant anyway. My whole family was there, and it was a family friend, and I was excited, but everyone was a little nervous.
Yeah.
And then for the first 2 weeks, we were like, yeah, we don't want to get sick. Like, we're going to stay home. I still had a training client come to my house because I was like, you're not sick, right? She's like, no. And I was like, okay, cool. I had one person come to my house, but otherwise we didn't really see anybody. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, we were, during those 2 weeks, we started watching like conspiracy theory documentaries and stuff. And Michael was like, wait, if I wonder if this could be like all the things that we know about government in the past. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really curious. So of course, at the end of the 2 weeks, everyone says, I remember the mayor said we're extending the lockdown until April 19th.
Yeah, which was a whole month total.
Yeah. And I was like,
LA,
no. And that's literally where I started questioning the whole pandemic. I was like, oh no, this is bad. This is really bad. And that's when I started talking online about it. And people would be like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you so intense about this? Like, don't you want to stay safe? I'm like, stay safe?
It's relative.
Yeah. Like, no, I want to go to work.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go to the gym. I want people like this. I was like, this is going to be bad. Oh my God. Yeah. I made no money. Like, no money. Yeah. And then, of course, the lockdown got extended to May 15th. And I was like, we're fucked. Like,
yeah.
I was like, this is so bad. Fast forward so I give birth in September of 2020. I was depressed by the end of my pregnancy because of the isolation, not seeing people. Obviously, we had our friends who we saw. We didn't tell our families that we saw them. And they know that now. So I don't care about saying it on here. And I don't care. Never wore a mask. Didn't do any of that stuff because I was like, this is insane.
Totally.
And it made moving to Texas really easy. And we moved to Texas January of 2021. So a year ago. And baby was 4 months old. And I was sad to leave because I was like, I'm leaving my home state. Like, I have never left. I've never left California.
Roots.
Yeah, I've never left California. But I was at the end of it, I was telling my sister, I remember, like, I hate it here. I hate it here. I love the beach. I love what California has to offer, like, all the fun stuff, but like, I hate it here. And she was like, oh, I was like, yeah, this is a nightmare for parents, really. Like, this is and it still is.
It's still the same.
Oh,
if not worse.
Yeah. Because now no one really cares about COVID, but they're still playing along with all the mandates and rules. And it's just like, what are we even doing?
Yeah.
So we left a little less than a year into the pandemic, and coming to Texas was such an incredible, like, my mental health immediately better.
Yeah.
Immediately. It was amazing.
Okay. So I want to back it up to March 2020 because I'll share that I went through like similar timeline as you, where I think, like, I wasn't following political people, but I was following, I call them health rebellions, like, and they had given a heads up, on the alternative news sources. And you're right, like, no, we took precautions. Like, I took precautions because asthma's in my history. I have breathing signs and symptoms, that have showed up in my life. And for those that are unaware, like, I was diagnosed with asthma by the time I was 2, and after working with alternative healers and MDs and others, it's been reduced down to like my birth experience and a vaccine injury, which is now public now. But the timeline was interesting because at that time I was just about to start practicing at a chiropractic office in Austin, and I was training pregnant and postpartum women part-time. And one of them is in the alternative health space as well. And she was the one that was like, hey, have you heard about this? I was like, actually, I've done a little digging, but what do you got? And nobody really knew, so she goes, I'm not going to train in person for 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'll give you some things to do at home. But then I was supposed to go speak at a seminar in Atlanta I was leaving Thursday, March 12th. And I literally got an email. It was like Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Seminars moved virtual. This is a pandemic. We're state of emergency. Don't come here. And I was like,
okay.
what the F?
Yeah.
And so I did all my research because they were saying respiratory virus. And I was like, oh shit, well, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a goner.
Yeah.
Because it's like my Achilles heel, at
Yes.
that point I was thinking. And so I chilled. I probably chilled for like 7 days. Like, it's hard for me to chill.
Yeah,
But
same.
in that time frame, like, I did all the research, and what I came up with was like, this is a load of shit. Like, this is not a respiratory thing. The breathing issues come about after the fact, and now we know, the ventilators are the worst thing you can do to somebody when they go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And so I was in group text with some old friend groups in Los Angeles, and there's about 4 or 5 of them in the group, and one of them's like, Lindsay, you need to take this seriously. You could die. And I said, I have taken this seriously. Do you not think that I have not done my research? Do you not, like, first of all, I have been taking revamped my whole health and wellness since like 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
Haven't, like, at that moment in time, I hadn't drank in like a year and a half. And prior to that, it was only like 5 times a year, where this particular friend of mine parties his ass off, not afraid to participate in extracurricular activities, and sent me the most fear-mongering article from, it was like the New York Post or CNN.
Right, of course.
And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. And so at that moment, I was like, look, that I was pre-med. I graduated with biology at Texas A&M. That I almost went to med school, made a pivot, pulled out, decided to go to chiropractic school. That I do my research. Like, and for you to like criticize me in my choices right now when you're in entertainment.
Yeah.
Then, okay, then if you don't want to be my friend, you don't have to, but I'll be here.
Yeah, I'm going to do me. I'm
going to do me. And that's when I started calling it a scamdemic and a pandemic and all that stuff. Yeah. But similar to you, when they extended the lockdowns in different parts of, I'm not going to call it quarantine because you quarantine sick people. It's a lockdown. It's house arrest. Yeah. But when they did that, I thought the exact same thing as you. I was like, oh, we're effed. Like, our economy's effed. Everything's effed. And what's wild is, like, months prior, at the end of Trump's term, I started looking at the economy and I was like, wow, this is like the best it's ever been. This is amazing. Like, persons of color, minority groups, everybody is benefiting. Yeah. Nobody looked at that. No. Nobody, well, the smart people dug deeper, but the critical thinkers dug deeper. But you weren't hearing that from CNN or, MSNBC or any news source. It was just very fear-mongering, what do you call it? Like, just dramatic politics, theatricals. It's, and the people who in my life, and I have a lot of them, who are very complete opposite of me, I'll text them and be like, so do you still think the vaccine works? Like, literally everyone's getting COVID. Well, yes, I do, because, could have been so much worse. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh God. I was like, okay, like, maybe, but this is not how vaccines are supposed to work. And, me suggesting anything outside the lines is just like, what do I know? And I'm like, oh, I've only been literally obsessed with this for 2 years now. Like, borderline, I have an addiction problem. But like, Michael's mom, I know she won't listen to this, but she was like, no. We were talking about the vaccine, and we did not get the vaccine. And of course they all did. Everyone in our family is vaccinated. And she's like, so, but what about the science? And
He was like, are you kidding me? Do you think we've just been like staring at the ceiling for 2 years and being like, God is going to save me? Like, no. He goes, I know more about this than you could ever know. I was like, no, I'm not saying that. No, I don't, at this point, getting the vaccine or not, I'm not going to say you shouldn't or you should.
Yeah.
I don't even care anymore. I would tell people that I was hesitant and worried for them to get it, and I wish you wouldn't, and they would say the opposite. I wish you would. I wish you would. So, it's like, who cares? We're seeing positive results. We're seeing very negative results of this vaccine. At this point, I don't care. We should have informed consent. You should know your risks.
Yeah.
And we should not. My vaccine doesn't make you safer. The fact that people are still denying that is insane to me.
Yeah.
And it is being fueled by the mainstream media and the government.
Mm-hmm.
By the government, who dictates what the media says.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have nuanced conversations. We can't have conversations about health. The CDC very quietly releases information about natural immunity. It's like, when you look at it with skeptical eyes, you can't deny the scam. Like, and if you think people who say that are conspiracy theorists, you are asleep. I'm not going to say brainwashed, but you are asleep. You are unable to have skeptical eyes because you are so indoctrinated by, as Dr. Stu calls it, Dr. Dogma.
Yeah. The white coats, like
saviors, it's this white coat savior complex. And yeah, I say it. I am grateful for Western medicine. I'm grateful for that it exists. Sure, we had to give our kid antibiotics. I'm grateful that exists. Would he have died? No. It was a UTI. It was just like bad and painful and swollen and whatever. But to just bow down to the white coat is,
or to like, science,
like
quotations,
like it makes you truly question everything. People say to me online from my high school, you went to Poly, like how could you say this about doctors? Like, you grew up highly educated, how could you say this? I'm like, that's the freaking point. You now think I'm stupid rather than thinking I'm as educated as you are, just thinking differently. What does that say about you? What does that say about our institutions? What does that say about our high schools and our teachers and our colleges? Like, whoa, where does this all come from? And I'm really like, how did I get here? Well, both I think Michael and I come from that type of education.
Yeah, you nailed it. And I wanted to go on another question, but you just said something so important. It's like our institutions, like where our kids are going, the schools, the universities, they're not teaching critical thinking anymore. They're teaching how to think.
What to think.
Like, I'm telling, and when, I think the Department of Education, let me look this up. When was it established? Department of Education established, I think it was 1979. I think that's right. But that's like our generation and everything. Like, I was born in 83, so I was indoctrinated with this institutional way of thinking.
Yeah, and then you went to chiropractic school, which is wild.
Yeah, and I think but there are people that would, like, from my family that would call me quack, and that was, oh God, this could be
so insulting.
It's so insulting, but that was a phrase that was given by lobbyists in the AMA. So we could go off on a podcast on that. But, when you take away critical thinking and the encouraging and the listening and the observing and those aspects of school and learning, you're just programming, and that's the scary part.
Yes. And I think that for the people who are before the Department of Education was created, boomers, we'll call them.
Yeah.
Boomers didn't have the internet, so they just believed everything their doctors told them.
They didn't have, but they're part of the generation where birth got moved to the hospital and the white coat savior complex and the marketing of
we can take away your pain.
Yeah, and
take away your sickness.
formula and convenience,
Yes.
and freaking smoking cigarettes.
Yes.
Like, oh my God.
And it's just, and I really am at the point where I'm like, for those people who are so indoctrinated to question authority and to question their, what they've injected in themselves or what they've learned is core shattering.
Yeah.
It is. Most people are unable to handle that kind of shakeup because they have been indoctrinated to this world of convenience and safety and fearing death and fearing, whatever else there is. But like, to question a vaccination and say no is like, goes against their very core. And that
It totally does.
That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And I think for me, like just personally, like that's when I started questioning all my belief systems was when I was in rock bottom. But you got to do that. Like, and I think that was the best thing I learned was to question everything and to have a growth mindset, because then you're not so rigid and blocked off. You're not even open to new ideas. Like,
totally. And I remember I was a little careful with what I said online before I gave birth. So from March to September, so 6 months, because I technically still was a coach at the gym. And when the gym reopened in June, I would coach there 5 mornings a week, just one class. So I was a little careful, but because I was like, I'm still on someone else's payroll basically. And people are coming to my class and, if I'm a psycho, like people could complain. As soon as I no longer worked there, all bets were off. But like my dad would say, we completely disagree. My dad and I completely disagree on everything. And that's hard for me because I'm like, wow, you were like my true north of information, when I thought, because he would be very pragmatic, very like logical, like socially liberal, fiscally conservative, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like realizing like you are a boomer who just believes the mainstream and whatever.
Yeah.
But my dad would say, Emily, be careful about what you say online. Like you're going to lose a lot of business. And I was just like, no, I'm not. I'm not. And this is like, I know we have to get off in a little bit, but like
I know
the most encouraging thing that I can say is like, say something, because I didn't care. I was like, if I get fired, I don't care. I don't care.
At that point, you're like, F it.
I'm leaving in September anyway. I'm going to go to $0, earning $0 from this gym. I don't care if it happens now. I don't care. Like this is not right. This is not right. And what's so interesting is speaking up about liberal agendas is praised. Speaking up about all the social injustices, quote unquote, is praised. And you have to have, hashtag BLM next to your email signature and like, you're amazing. It's like, okay, cool. Like, I don't care. Like, you should be able to do that. Free speech, do what you want. But me saying I'd rather get COVID than the vaccine is now I'm a terrorist. And like, so I should just like shut up and go away. And my dad saying that fueled my fire. I was like, I'm not going to lose business. I did for a little bit.
But then I feel like right now, especially 2 years into this, people are hungry. They know people are starting to wake up and they're realizing something's off.
Yeah.
Like, and I like that's courage right there.
And I've gotten a lot more business because of it.
Yeah, totally.
And I've lost a lot of friends, and that's a bummer. But I'm like, you'll either come around or you won't, and I'm cool to wait.
Totally. So on your social media, on your Instagram, you talk a lot about and share a lot about what people share with you, their stories, especially in the birth world.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you've seen, you've come across, and some of the stories, even from nurses, birth, like the whole realm, over the last 2 years? What are some of the wildest things?
God.
I would say wildest, but they're probably quite common.
Yeah. I mean, our friend, I don't know if you've ever met her, but and I've never met her in person, just online, who tested positive for COVID at birth. And I believe she had a home birth. This was like 2 weeks ago. And in California, baby had to go to the NICU because of meconium.
Yeah.
And mom did not see her baby for a full week. Because she had COVID, she could not go into the hospital. I mean, I literally feel like so ragey.
Positive.
Yeah, I feel so ragey inside right now because of that. Like, I would burn that place down.
For sure.
But her husband could go.
Okay.
They share a house. They share a bed. They sleep in the same room.
They swap saliva.
But he never tested positive, but he could go to the hospital.
And we all know how faulty the PCR test is.
How does that make sense? Yeah. How does that make sense? And it's just, for me, it's like, people will message me online and they're like, what are your recommendations for natural delivery in a hospital? And I say, I don't recommend it. I'm over it. Like, I don't recommend it.
Those two things don't go together.
Those two things do not go together. I get it if you have insurance and like, maybe you can't afford out of hospital birth. That's an entirely separate problem. I have empathy for women in situations where it is finances. Like, that sucks to me. But if it's just like, well, I feel a little bit safer here or whatever, and I'm like, are you open to exploring the safety of an out of hospital birth? Of course there are circumstances for everybody, and there's no judgment. It's really just a conversation. What do you recommend for a natural delivery in a hospital? I don't recommend it. Get an epidural. If you're going to go to the hospital, get a freaking epidural. And that sucks to say. And I know women who have had natural deliveries in hospitals, but in the climate we're in with COVID, where everyone is psycho about protocols and processes and masks or whatever, like,
it's so impossible.
It's so impossible. Like, I believe there are hospitals currently who are not dealing with that drama, but by and large, most hospitals are like COVID protocols still. So how are you supposed to have a chill, beautiful experience in the hospital where you're wearing a mask and everyone's wearing a hazmat suit, and you have to get a Q-tip shoved up your nose in labor, but your husband and your doula don't? Like, how does that make any sense? Like, there's no logic. So the stories are wild to me. I don't try and convince anyone to do an out of hospital birth, but I really ask those questions. Like, are you open to it? Are you open to exploring the wonderful side of it? Well, what if something goes wrong? I go, well, what if everything goes perfect? The chances of everything going perfect outside of the hospital are so much higher than something going wrong.
Yeah.
So much higher.
Hold on. Can I share this photo of the hazmat suit that you sent me?
Oh, please. Yeah. Yes. So that was a birth I was at. I did not tell my family that I was at a birth 4 days before I went to LA with a client who was positive for COVID. Cat's out of the bag. My client called me about a week before that, maybe 9 days before that, crying. Oh my God, I'm sick and I just took an at-home test and I have COVID. I'm so upset. And she was at that point 40 weeks.
Oh.
And she's like, I don't want you to come. I was like, Catherine, you follow me online. I do not care. I will go.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to your birth. I don't care. I was like, if I get COVID and I have to cancel my trip, whatever.
Yeah.
She felt fine the next day. She felt sick that day, got a positive test. She felt fine the next day, 40 weeks pregnant. And I was like, you're a healing machine. Like, you're healthy. That's amazing. Like, you got over it. That's so great. And of course, 8 days after that, we are at the hospital, test positive for COVID with a PCR.
Ugh.
And she
Which about 30 other things can cause a PCR test to test positive.
Yeah. And the nurse was like, oh no. And they changed their plastic clothes every time they came in. The OB was wearing that, what construction workers wear when they're sanding wood, with a mask over it and a face shield and a hairnet. We could not understand, I am not kidding, anything we said. We had to have the nurse literally translate for us. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And her husband and I didn't have to get tested, and we weren't wearing masks. Like, we wore masks when they were in the room, but we didn't have our masks on. And Catherine didn't wear her mask the entire time. And I didn't get COVID. We were all fine.
If it's that deadly where you have to wear that, we would all be dead. We would have been dead in 2020.
Yeah. And I was just like, how can you look as a medical provider? how can you look at the situation and not be disturbed?
Yeah.
I was like, I know we talked about it after that birth. I was like, everything they did, I was like, you're messing everything up. Keep going. You're like, why stop now? You know? And it's just like, it's traumatic as a doula to know how beautiful and how wonderful and how peaceful and how unsterile birth really is, and to still have women. And again, I'm not trying to shame or judge, because we just are in a world where, what if everything goes wrong? That's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if everything went right? Like, this is
Yeah.
wrong. Hospital births are wrong. Like, that
Yeah.
is my opinion. And again, grateful for Western medicine, absolutely necessary. Certain times, if I had to have a C-section, I would be super grateful. If I had to transfer, but to start there and just expect it to be this natural physiologic experience is just uninformed. And that's what you and I are trying to do, is inform women that, you know, the systems don't have our best interest in mind.
Right. And
people get really mad when I say that, because they're like, but my nurses and my doctors are so nice and they do care about my emotional well-being. I'm like, well, that's all great.
Yeah.
They probably do. But as a system, no, they don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Individuals, yes. Systemically, no.
It's birth in a hospital. Like, first of all, pregnancy is not a sickness. It's not a disease. And hospitals were made for sick.
Yes.
So to have like everything else that's sick in the hospital, and then you want to go give birth in the hospital, that was what was like throwing me off initially and made me dive in. And I discovered birth outside the hospital. It's like, holy shit, this existed.
And I know multiple women who've transferred to hospitals from a home birth, and they're like, I'm grateful that everyone's fine, but like, it sucked.
Yeah.
And my next birth, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to home birth again. And if I have to transfer again, oh, well, but like, no way.
Yeah. I think, the pendulum has swung so far in birth, in medicine, in everything, so far to the side of the Western medicine, where we've lost the wisdom and traditions of traditional medicine, of the innate intelligence that's passed on from generation to generation.
Yeah. And unfortunately, now it is political, to like circle back to the original intention of the podcast. Like, bodily autonomy, leaving California, bodily autonomy was a big part of that.
Yeah.
And choosing to birth outside of the medical system, big part of that. Like, if you believe in bodily autonomy, why are you still going to a hospital?
Or why are you on the side of mandates?
Yeah. And people might be upset about that. And I understand. Like, I was there. I get it. I'm not trying to shame anyone, or you might be triggered, but I'm not trying to tell you you're a bad person. It's just like I did and you did. Like, there's got to be a good reason for all this. Like, why people are choosing to birth outside of the system, why people are choosing to not get vaccinated or not vaccinate their kids, like, or vote Republican when you would never expect that from them. It's like, we need to ask more questions.
Absolutely. Okay, so I know you got to get off, and we'll probably do a follow-up. But I've been asking some of the guests, what is your favorite birth book?
Oh.
If you have one. If you don't, what are your favorite resources, if you have any?
That's a really good question. I'm more of like an Instagram, obviously, Instagram page person. I don't really, I mean, the Ina May book is amazing.
Yeah, it's like timeless.
Ina May's Guide to Midwifery. And then I think she has one that's Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Those are both fantastic. But I love following, obviously, BIRTHFIT, Birth Uprising.
Yeah.
She does a series called Shit My OB Said.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, and just like the weird stuff you hear from doctors and nurses at the hospital. It's like, whoa. Pain-Free Birth. Love her. Badass Mama Birther. Badass Mother Birther. Badass Mother Birther. Birth videos. There's this other woman called Sacred Birth Doula. And her whole thing is she's Black, and she basically educates Black women on how to get out of the system. And because Black women,
she's great.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
And she has a package called Know Your Rights Birth Package. And it's like everything you can refuse in the hospital. It's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Those would be my top ones to start off with.
Cool.
And me. But I think the best thing to do, and how I started, was like listening to people like you or women who've had unmedicated home births. Like, tell me about it. Why weren't you scared? What if something, like, tell me about all the things. Like, this seems crazy to me. Like, it's not. It's really not. What's crazy is medicalized birth. So crazy.
Yeah.
So those Instagram accounts are so great because it just gives you snippets of like how it can be and how it should be, in my opinion.
Cool.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
Okay, I am on Instagram at Emily Stanwyck. I'm teaching the BIRTHFIT prenatal education series starting February 9th. So we got a little bit of time. And that is an on like Zoom birth education class. So everything I've learned from you through BIRTHFIT and asking my own questions. Yeah, and personal experience, birth education. And I would love anyone to join. And if price is an issue, I will absolutely work with you.
Cool.
Yeah. So you can find that on my website, emilystanwyck.com.
Awesome.
Yay.
Well, thanks so much for being here
and
sharing a little bit about politics and parenting. I'm sure we'll get
we could talk for hours.
Yeah. Because we didn't even touch on like children and the effects of what's going on there and basically the child abuse that's happening.
Another reason why we moved.
Yeah.
For real.
Like maybe that's a whole nother episode. But thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Emily.
Bye.